Exploring the Massachusetts coast, two divers, initially seeking lobsters and photographic subjects, found their attention irresistibly drawn downwards. Their gazes were fixed on a dark, unnatural shape looming large against the shimmering ocean floor, stirring a growing sense of wonder and apprehension. A sunken ship materialized from the murky depths, instantly drawing their full attention away from any prior pursuit. As a hand reached out, they recognized the vessel's tragic history, yet their gaze quickly sharpened, now keenly focused on the beckoning prospect of salvage. Discovering a shelf of liquor bottles amidst the wreckage, one diver regarded the unexpected bounty with a satisfied gaze. Their companion, turning to acknowledge the find, widened their eyes in pleasant surprise, musing about capturing this unique catch with a photograph. As a flash went off, their eyes widened with sheer horror behind the mask, revealing an enormous shark lunging from the murky depths. It thrashed violently, filling the water with crimson, a sudden attack that promised an eerie silence to follow. The tattered "Welcome to Amity" sign, a cheerful facade now ripped and weathered, bore a mocking irony as a police vehicle sped past the broken remnants of the shore. Nearly 3 years had passed, yet the town remained haunted by a lingering memory, its struggle to recover etched into the crumbling landscape and the driver's deep-seated preoccupation with the sea. The town of Amity presented a tired face, its hopes for renewed life weighed against indelible, faded memories of its past. Behind the tinted lenses, a steady, somber gaze gripped the steering wheel, reflecting the unshakable burden of a survivor marked by what they had endured. The mayor, beaming with earnest hope, addressed the gathered crowd of natives and investors, proclaiming the new motel as a vital new lease on life for a town that had endured tough years. But amidst the optimism, a police chief, his expression unreadable behind dark glasses, listened to a hushed report, his gaze hinting at a deep-seated worry for what the future might truly hold. The deep furrow in their brow and the subtle tension around their mouth, despite the green-tinted glasses, suggested a profound internal struggle. As their fingers idly pressed against their chin, they internally dismissed any simplistic explanations, sensing that this was no simple matter beneath the town's hopeful facade. As the water erupted in a playful spray, one figure immersed themselves in the simple joy of the moment, while another watched with a still, shadowed gaze. For them, the sound of splashing, often associated with happiness, carried a different, perhaps heavier, resonance. Behind the green-tinted goggles, their eye held a distant, thoughtful gaze, reflecting a smaller figure's bubbly joy in the water. As a memory surfaced, the thought of last year, the surf dash lingered, perhaps tinged with a quiet wistfulness for times past. A hesitant voice broke the silence, gingerly probing the painful past and asking if this was the site of the orca's demise and the associated trauma, and if the other had returned since. The blunt, unwavering no that followed hung heavy in the air, a stark refusal to revisit a place burdened by such sorrow. Peering in, a direct question sought any significant findings from the scene. The figure in green goggles, with a slight shrug of their raised arm, reported only the usual signs of a messy place, lamenting the absence of a specific law against drunk driving as the officer nearby listened, their gaze cast downwards in quiet resignation. As the person in sunglasses intently examined the small vial, they crisply ordered the pills to be sent for analysis. Beside them, a shirtless figure casually dismissed the deceased as reckless, yet an underlying note of skepticism arose, questioning the peculiar circumstance of both individuals meeting the same fate. High on the tower, a figure meticulously scanned the distant waters through binoculars, their gaze betraying a deep, protective concern beyond the immediate swimmers below. Even as a voice cut through the air, calling Chief Brody, their intense focus remained unbroken, fixed on a vision of safety for the beach. Responding to the other's anxious plea about the intimidating watchtower driving away potential buyers, the bespectacled figure pointed upwards with resolute conviction. They firmly stated the watchtower's permanent necessity, asserting that only an impenetrable steel wall could ever render it obsolete. With a dutiful gaze, one figure attended to the mundane matters of town life, while others excitedly prepared their boat, packing provisions as if for an epic journey. Out on the seemingly empty sea, two figures glided with exhilaration, enjoying the vast expanse all to themselves, almost a subtle disquiet settling over the otherwise carefree scene. The thrilling ride was abruptly shattered when a menacing fin erupted from the water, sending the waterskier recoiling with a desperate scream. From the boat, The driver turned with a shocked, questioning gaze as they witnessed the terrifying interruption. With a deadly fin now between the frantic waterskiers, the boat's driver, their face a mask of panic, vowed to pull them out of range and prevent a fall. The engines roared, propelling the main boat towards the terrified figures, while others from a smaller craft desperately urged them to swim. Only when they reached a precarious, safe range was the pursuit momentarily halted as the engines were finally cut. They leaned heavily into the waterski, body tensed, eyes wide as the relentless pull of the boat dragged them closer. Their gaze was fixed on the churning water, where the deadly fin ominously cut a path, now directly separating them from their companion. Their frantic kicks churned the water, a desperate struggle against the terrifying proximity of death. Behind them, a monstrous maw with jagged teeth lunged forward, relentlessly closing in. The once calm water erupted in a crimson spray as a figure was violently pulled under by unseen jaws, their name echoing in desperate, horrified shouts from the boat. Panicked eyes scanned the bloody surface as someone frantically urged others to ready a defense, a chilling whisper asking, "Will it come back?" Their dread was quickly confirmed as the beast, still ravenous, violently breached the surface once more. With desperate urgency, they commanded the other to throw it now, their eyes wide with fear. With a powerful throw, the other launched the explosive, their determined gaze following it as a massive blast tore through the attacking creature, simultaneously obliterating their own precarious escape. Over the radio, they solemnly reported the sudden, drastic change to Chief Brody, explaining how a moment of carefree enjoyment had abruptly turned. With a grim set to their mouth and an urgent point of their hand, the chief absorbed the chilling details, their gaze fixed on some unseen development. The ominous cable, "Do not dock" sign loomed as a voice, heavy with disbelief, recounted the sudden disaster. In an instant, they were reportedly blown to smithereens, the chilling words echoing against the desolate setting. With a deeply troubled gaze through their green-tinted sunglasses, they grappled with the unfolding news, their mind racing with questions about who they were. A hint of alarm entered their voice, wondering aloud if these unknown figures could be off-islanders, or even Chief Brody. Arriving home, the figure in the jeep stared, their green-tinted gaze wide with disbelief, uttering a shocked question about what they were seeing. A casual greeting was offered from another holding a paintbrush, while a third figure, brush in hand, looked on with a subtly worried expression. With a regretful yet firm gaze, one informed the other that they would have to be grounded for the season. The words were met with an immediate, shocked denial, as the other's eyes widened and their hand outstretched, protesting their personal investment and the other children involved. With a furrowed brow and mouth slightly agape, the figure thrashed gently in uneasy sleep, a quiet voice asking if the sharks were haunting them again. Indeed, their tormented slumber was filled with those dreadful visions, almost tangible in their unsettling presence. Roused, they stood, one hand running through disheveled hair, their gaze fixed downwards with a subtle, reflective frown. The heavy truth of the situation, and what it meant for them, settled in with quiet resignation. Having been roused from uneasy sleep, the figure stood by the window, their gaze lost in the tumultuous night sky as they held back the curtain. After another strange accident, it was clear that on this night especially, sleep would not come. With a focused gaze, they mused on the inaction of the town fathers, knowing they couldn't rely on others. Their hands moved with grim purpose, meticulously arranging the bullets, determined to be ready for whatever came next. The heavy rain lashed down on the drudging boat as one figure sighed, questioning how much longer Chief Brody expected them to continue this arduous search. With a weary voice, another replied they'd be there until something substantial was found, their words punctuated by a sharp sneeze revealing the harsh toll of the relentless conditions. Eyes wide with revelation, they gripped the cable, exclaiming at the sudden sight of the electric line stretching to the mainland. Their patience seemingly snapped. They declared their resolve to quit, leaving others to face their troubles alone. With a dismissive gaze, one figure asserted that certain explanations were mere fairy tales for those who shied away from disturbing truths. The other, eyes narrowed in frustration, passionately countered, insisting those theories were nothing but imaginative reconstructions, while an observer quietly held a mug, looking on with weary contemplation. Eyes sparkling with anticipation, one figure eagerly voiced their desire to go out on the new catamaran. With a challenging gaze and a pointed gesture, the other immediately questioned the implied shared plans, as a third figure, watching with an amused smirk, clarified the vessel's true, more intimate purpose. Confident strides brought two figures forward, one calling out a lively, "Hey, ahoy," towards the one already settled nearby, who lifted their gaze in mild surprise. Another figure, observing from the left with a knowing look, mused that these off-islanders seemed to be in the mood for company. One figure fretted over a bothersome blemish, pointing upwards with a grimace, wondering aloud if it was noticeable from afar. Their companion, looking on with a hopeful, slightly self-conscious expression, mused about the upcoming encounter, hoping for shared experiences to ease any anxieties. With eyes closed, one figure softly stated they were cousins, their hand resting gently on the arm of the blonde beside them. The figure in glasses, with an animated expression, had just inquired about their relationship, while another looked on. With a lively gaze over their shoulder and an energetic paddle stroke, one person playfully called out an invitation for someone to come closer, promising protection. On the nearby dock, others admired a boat, noting its comforts like a stereo and pillows with relaxed appreciation. As one figure gestured toward the lighthouse, awkwardly suggesting it as a quaint spot for stargazing, a voice from the next boat playfully offered protection. The figure in yellow, with a knowing grin, then explicitly identified it as Makeout Point, causing the person in green to glance back with a mixture of amusement and mild embarrassment. With an excited gasp and a wide grin, one figure eagerly pointed ahead, remarking on how fruitful their afternoon observation had become. Their keen gaze focused on the two distant specimens carefully navigating the rugged terrain, a sense of discovery evident in their expression. Twisting their bound hands, one figure threw a venomous glare over their shoulder, sharply telling off an unseen presence to mind its own business. The other figure, crouching nearby, watched with an unreadable, stoic gaze, absorbing the furious outburst. A collective gasp of horror escaped them as they stumbled upon a beached whale, its side terribly gouged, one figure quickly recognizing the nearby police boat with wide, shocked eyes. Kneeling to inspect the grisly wounds, Chief Brody offered a casual, yet unsettling, explanation about a big fish, while others recoiled from the stench and severity of the damage. One figure earnestly pointed to shark chartings, explaining their work tracking the creatures for potential medical breakthroughs, believing deeply in their ability to save lives. Listening intently, the other then calmly asserted that sharks act without emotions like revenge, explaining the whale incident as a natural, distant event. Their gaze drifted, a thoughtful expression on their face as they acknowledged the unexpected turn of events. A slight furrow of their brow conveyed a dawning realization, hinting at the surprising implications for their work. Despite the planned picnic, one figure remained intently focused on the distant ocean through their binoculars, a small figure reaching up towards them, seeking a moment of their attention. From the picnic blanket, another, with a hint of resigned patience, offered a sandwich, only to be politely declined by the preoccupied gazer, who had already eaten. The older figure firmly declared that going in the water was off-limits, much to the younger one's immediate dismay. With an upward, pleading gaze and a hand raised in protest, they voiced their clear disappointment at the decision. The gesturing figure welcomed the caravan of potential investors, their enthusiastic hand reaching towards the bright sun as if embracing new prospects. Nearby, another figure, cigar in mouth and gaze slightly averted, Riley hoped no one had forgotten their suntan lotion for the once private beach. Meanwhile, the newcomers surged forward, their faces alight with anticipation for the shore. One figure, with a worried gaze through their glasses, hesitated to ask the broadly smiling individual about the true safety of the beaches. With a confident grin, the other assured them the waters couldn't be safer, as a third figure cheerfully offered lunch. With a frustrated gaze fixed forward, the yellow-haired figure lamented a potential loss, immediately dismissing the idea that the situation was merely someone doing their job. The suited figure watched them intently, their own expression conveying a quiet understanding of the outburst. A sense of unease hung over all the precautions as one noted the constant presence of the distant figure with binoculars. With a dismissive gesture, the other quickly pointed out their bird-watching, casually mentioning seagulls and ducks. The blue expanse above remained deceptively peaceful as a silent hunter moved just below the hulls of children's boats, making a mockery of any comfort about the day. On shore, figures conversed with a blend of youthful worry and confident reassurance, while another group, caught up in animated bike antics, narrowly avoided a tumble into the very waters that held the unseen threat. With a determined plunge, one figure dropped into the water, their body tensing for the impact as they broke the deceptively peaceful surface. From the precarious cliff edge, the other watched intently, a worried gaze fixed on the spreading ripples, knowing well the unseen dangers lurking below. With a cruel grin, one figure dangled another precariously over the churning water, their struggling victims' limbs flailing in desperation. A sinister fin cut the surface nearby, amplifying the aggressors' taunts about becoming shark bait and challenging them to call upon the deep's dangers. With a sudden, powerful yank, the figure was hauled clear of the threatening depths. Their body flung upward, eyes wide with a gasp of surprise and emerging relief, as they narrowly escaped the watery grasp. As the two dripped from their ordeal, they slumped with faces hidden and gazes fixed downwards, consumed by a profound sense of shame. The third figure looked on with worried eyes, understanding that the humiliation they now carried felt worse than any physical threat they had faced. Evening indeed brought more cause for resentment as one figure, with an unyielding gaze, firmly dictated a change of plans for an outing. Their companion, eyes burning with frustration, angrily questioned why their own feelings were being so disregarded. Maintaining a stern resolve, the first figure stated their deeper concerns lay with both them and the town itself. The child, standing casually in the doorway, asked an innocent question about Reeves, causing the seated figure to grimace, their gaze fixed downwards as they sharply interjected to silence them. This sudden outburst immediately drew the attention of the figure whose head had been resting, who stirred with a clear look of surprise and concern, demanding to know what had transpired. With a wide, upset gaze fixed upwards and a fist clenched in agitation, the child vehemently recounted being called shark bait and held over the water, along with harsh words about another's sanity. Their expression then softened slightly, quickly dismissing the outburst with a hesitant, "Nothing, Daddy," as if trying to retract their words. A tear escaped their eye as they pondered if others' hurtful words truly mattered, their gaze lost in a quiet sadness. While one gently offered comfort to Sean, who had been upset by what was said, another stood with a defiant posture, eyes burning with anger and a strong vow to confront. The next afternoon, a diving class commenced in Amity Bay, where a main diver, holding a spear gun, offered a calm gaze and words of reassurance about the low visibility. Despite the soothing tone, one of the students, wide-eyed and mouth slightly agape, seemed to register a flicker of unease at the news. A stern voice carried across the water, urging caution and a reminder of their signals as they prepared to hunt for dinner. With a specific warning to stay clear of the perilous cable junction, the urgency in the instruction was clear against the visible danger sign. As they tried to sneak away towards the docks, one person forcefully pushed another back over the fence, sternly telling them to get out. With wide, pleading eyes, an observer watched the scene unfold, while another figure, climbing over, angrily threatened to tell their mother about the escapade. Having reluctantly agreed to a demand, the curly-haired person's wide eyes conveyed utter disbelief and frustration at the new complications. The blonde individual, with a firm gaze and pursed lips, listened intently, unswayed by the protests about the added burden and the situation with Brooke. Through the diving mask, a determined gaze scanned the dim, turbid waters, acknowledging the need for a change in plans. Signaling an assent with a raised thumb, they inwardly conceded that the area was simply too murky to continue safely with the group. Propelling through the water with their spear gun at the ready, a determined focus filled their masked gaze. They considered how a small detour for dinner was a natural, almost self-evident priority amidst their larger mission. A disbelieving war flashed through their mind, replacing their prior focus with sudden shock. Their eyes, wide and startled within the mask, stared ahead as if confronted with the utterly unexpected. With a terrifying, massive shark surging directly towards them, the diver reacted instantly, pulling their inflation cord to shoot past the predator in a desperate, bubble-streaked escape. As they propelled upward, their urgent gaze briefly took in another diver, unconscious and bleeding, rising helplessly to the surface. One confidently promised to handle a situation for their companion, receiving a firm nod of agreement in return. Nearby, as tasks were delegated to make sure the coast was clear, another couldn't help but gaze at the bustling activity and question the very idea of anyone being alone in such a vibrant setting. The bicyclist sped away, looking back with a teasing call, convinced the two figures watching them were envious of Mike's plans with the new girl. One of the standing figures crossed their arms defensively, while the other simply watched, a hint of irritation clouding their gaze. As the bicyclist sped away, relaying news of a relationship deemed far from idyllic, the dark-haired figure's face contorted with scorned fury. With a pointed finger and intense gaze, they vented their outrage, while their companion absorbed the fiery declaration. With a confident smile and a direct gaze, one of them suggested a sail on the free ocean, hinting at the intriguing possibility of who they might bump into. Their companion looked back, a puzzled expression on their face as they questioned the deeper meaning, while the first's eyes held a subtle glint of mischievous intention. As the main sailboat was poised to shove off, an individual aboard held a rope, their focused gaze meeting the urgent call from another in a smaller boat, who stressed the need for Mike to get back. Despite the perfect sunny day and snappy breeze, a sense of immediate purpose clearly animated their departure. As others seemed to embrace the excitement of the impending sail, one person's gaze held a sharp intensity, contemplating the afternoon ahead. For them, the prospect felt like facing an offshore island, standing entirely on its own. One figure, holding a garment, turned with a decisive step, explaining they were going out and questioning a forgotten date, their gaze unwavering. The person reaching out blinked in surprise, uttering, "huh," while a third figure, leaning from a boat, sighed in disappointment, "ah." With a self-deprecating smile and a hand adjusting their hat, they looked up, trying to make light of their predicament by joking about getting lost on the island. Yet, the quiet thought of another rejection and the subtle downturn of their mouth betrayed a deeper feeling of being left out. Turning their back with a dismissive gesture, the figure in pink firmly stated there was no space for the waiting group, whose expectant gazes searched for an opening. A final, resentful whisper about blackmailers sealed their refusal to let them approach. With a warm gaze, one figure offered companionship and reassurance, bringing a look of sincere gratitude to the smaller one's face. Across the water, a playful challenge to race to the lighthouse was declared, met with an immediate, eager response as eyes widened in anticipation of the chase. With the impromptu race now in full swing, figures carved through the water, leaving white trails in their urgent pursuit. A voice bristled with sarcastic frustration while another, eyes wide with urgency, warned that their targets would soon be lost. The Sandpiper, its crew unseen but undoubtedly focused, sliced through the sparkling water. A distant, spirited call to come onto the lighthouse added a surge of eager determination to their pursuit in the ongoing race. With a determined gaze fixed on the distance, one figure gripped the railing, leaning out. Beside them, another peered over with wide, surprised eyes, questioning aloud who exactly they were observing. One figure, with hair flying in the wind and hands actively controlling the boat, spiritedly declared a race against the other. From across the deck, the recipient of the challenge responded with a wide, cheeky grin and an open gesture, proposing a more inviting destination together. As the diving class came ashore to an awaiting ambulance and Chief Brody, the uniformed figure stood with hands on hips, conveying the grave news of an embolism, air bubbles likely reaching a diver's brain. A diver, gaze fixed on their equipment, seemed to process the serious implications, while other onlookers listened with concerned expressions. Grimly, a figure in sunglasses held up the bitten equipment, declaring the damage a clear sign of panic. A nearby figure, hand to their mouth, looked on with deep concern, questioning how an experienced diver could have surfaced so improperly without exhaling. The faces surrounding them reflected shared worry. With a grin set to their jaw, they gripped the binoculars tightly, their gaze sweeping intently across the horizon, the water, and the surrounding docks. Every detail was meticulously scrutinized, a deep worry etched onto their focused expression after the unsettling discovery. Their intense gaze, sweeping across the landscape, finally fixated on Sean's abandoned bike lying forlornly in the brush. The sight of it, overturned and still, confirmed the growing dread sparked by earlier grim signs of peril. Their gaze, now sweeping the water, confirmed the chilling absence of Mike's catamaran from its mooring. A profound grim realization settled over them, a quiet moan of fear escaping them as the gravity of the situation became terrifyingly clear. Amidst the sudden, chaotic dash of boats, a sense of dismay crossed their face as secretive plans turned into an open race. Leaning precariously, one person defiantly stirred the water, internally chafing at being treated like a dog, as another's determined offer to help was met with a stern gaze and a firm command to stay where you are. As their craft lagged behind the others, One urged them onward with an impatient glance towards the distant sails. But the other, turning a thoughtful gaze, questioned the very purpose of their chase, only to be met with an exasperated reminder of their supposed goal. One figure, eyes closed in contented bliss, pulled the other close, dismissing any thoughts of racing as they yearned for intimate solitude. Though initially holding a thoughtful gaze regarding a potential, excellent opportunity, the other reciprocated, just as a violent tremor from below abruptly shattered their peaceful isolation. Eyes wide with terror, one's hands flew to their mouth, a desperate shriek torn from them as a monstrous shark erupted from the waves, pulling a struggling companion from their craft. Their desperate calls for help went unnoticed by another figure in a distant boat, still lost in oblivious play, unaware of the sudden, deadly peril. Leaning casually into the rush of water, their eyes were closed in serene enjoyment as the sea sprayed around them. For them, the vast waters were a mere plaything, their complacent smile betraying a dangerous underestimation of what might lie ahead. A worried gaze intently swept the water, one hand clutching an oar, as a hushed question confirmed their deepest fears. A chilling certainty settled in, urging them to immediately seek help, their thoughts consumed by the safety of the racing boats. Triumphant laughter rippled across the water as leading boats sped past the lighthouse, one calling out to a lagging competitor that the race was over and it was time to turn. Yet, watching the chase, another participant sighed with exasperation, observing that they were still being followed. As the fog thickened, a voice radioed from the lighthouse, describing a difficult choice to head towards Dutch Harbor on a hunch despite the uncertainty. On shore, worried eyes pleaded for answers, one person frantic about Andy, while another, with a hand to their mouth, demanded to know where their boy was. With a strained grimace and a fierce grip on the rope, they battled the churning waves as a voice from the sky confirmed the boats were racing. A bewildered query followed, wondering what could possibly drive such a frantic pursuit. As a peculiar craft descended from the lingering fog to hover above, it broke the stillness of the choppy waters. The individuals on the small boats, their faces a mixture of surprise and bewilderment, craned their necks to gaze upwards, wondering aloud at the sudden, impossible sight before them. The urgent command to return to port immediately blared from the hovering craft, catching them off guard. One figure hunched their head defensively, while the other stared upwards, eyes wide with a mix of shock and apprehension. From the vehicle, a voice urgently demanded to know why others had been left and their current location. One figure, pointing skyward, proposed going to the Cape as darkness approached, questioning the next move. With a challenging gaze, another suggested sleeping on the beach, asking if fear was holding them back, while a third worried aloud about someone's father being upset. As one struggled to repair their inflatable and stay in the race, a terrifying shark suddenly lunged from the water, seizing a figure in its jaws. The horrifying spectacle left another watching with wide, shocked eyes, muttering an incredulous curse. A sudden, terrifying lunge from the depths violently capsized one's craft, sending them flying with a desperate cry as the monstrous shark's jaws clamped down. From a nearby vessel, an observer gasped in alarm, their gaze fixed on the thrashing figure while they frantically tried to help and whistle a piercing warning. Yet, the relentless predator struck again with a powerful tail and crunching force, tearing into another boat and scattering more people into the treacherous sea. With eyes wide in frantic terror, the figure thrashed violently through the churning water, their gaze locked on the nearby vessel. A panicked shout from the boat implored them to swim faster, the menacing fin of the shark slicing ominously through the waves behind them. With a figure half unconscious, others were pulled aboard in frantic haste, their panicked gazes sweeping the chaotic waters. As boats collided violently, masts snapping and figures flung airborne, the surging, lethal shark fin became an omnipresent, terrifying knife cutting through the entire desperate sea. A dazed figure, half unconscious, was pulled from the churning water, their eyes wide and unfocused. Nearby, two others in a boat struggled with panicked faces, straining to haul another person aboard amidst desperate splashes. Their wide eyes, filled with terror, registered yet another figure floating perilously close in the chaotic waters. Facing the brutal reality of their situation, they frantically worked to secure the loose wreckage, their expressions etched with a desperate resolve, even as one voice anxiously questioned if anyone was hurt. But the brief respite shattered as a massive wham announced the shark's terrifying return, sending one reeling from the impact, eyes wide with the chilling understanding that the predator still held them in its unforgiving grasp. A determined gaze locked on the task, they desperately worked to secure the wreckage, urging themselves to tie it all together as if it were their last hope. Suddenly, a violent smash rocked their precarious platform, prompting a wide-eyed shout of alarm as they tried to warn of another impending impact. Gazing with worry at the churning waters, one survivor gripped the wreckage, hoping others were safe as the shark violently slammed into another mast, causing more devastation. A determined figure grimaced, seizing a broken spar as a makeshift harpoon, while the beast, seemingly anticipating their desperate shouts to kill it, twisted the mast, dragging another into the unforgiving sea. With a gaze fixed on the distant sailboat, they gripped the debris, their voice filled with a desperate relief as they recounted how two had escaped and Mike had been taken aboard. Yet, a palpable worry remained, hoping he was truly safe. A figure clinging to the raft gazed upward, murmuring about the awaited helicopter's return, while nearby, others strained to pull a waterlogged body aboard, anxiously questioning their condition. With a pained grimace, one survivor clutched their side, receiving gentle instructions to lie down from a supportive companion, as a small figure sat quietly, their eyes downcast, feeling the escalating despair. Amidst the turbulent waters, one figure desperately strained against a spar, insisting they had to keep their damaged raft together as thick fog rolled in. Another, slumped nearby, whispered of reaching their limits, while a third looked on with weary eyes, wondering if their endurance would ever be enough. With focused intensity, they peered through the binoculars as the rescue boat slowed, searching for any sign of life. A hopeful whisper escaped them, wondering if the distant figures on the beach could truly be Mike or Sean. Hauled from the water, a figure gasped a frantic question about another missing, their gaze fixed on the boat's occupant as a location was quickly given. But the urgency mounted as those splashing behind them cried out, an arm flailing wildly, warning of a menacing presence in the depths. With eyes squeezed shut in desperate urgency, they shouted out a mayday, pinpointing the missing person's location and pleading for a chopper. Beside them, one clutched a small device, their wide, somber gaze fixed forward, while another behind watched with worried eyes as the grim reality of their words settled in. A figure watched the hazy horizon with a worried gaze, acknowledging they would drift past their target as a foreboding rock pile emerged through the fog. Moments later, another figure urgently pointed out a cable junction ahead, their expression shifting to alarm as they realized the boat was too close to shore and going aground. As the helicopter pierced the thick fog, its occupants stared down in horrified realization at the numerous small boats adrift and the menacing shark circling below. From the choppy waters, frantic pleas for help merged with urgent shouts warning of impending danger, amplifying the scene's chaos. As the helicopter hovered, its crew urgently directed the stranded, their gaze sharply noting not only the scattered boats, but also a sinister shark fin circling below. People nervously edged towards the debris, their apprehension palpable, just as a desperate cry of "look out" pierced the air, emphasizing the immediate danger. Caught in the gargantuan maw, the helicopter violently buckled and spun, its occupants' panic screams lost amidst the wrenching crunch and whirring chaos. With a devastating final blast, the mangled craft erupted into a fiery ruin, spewing burning debris and hopelessness across the turbulent waters. As the entire area, even the water itself, became a terrifying expanse of flames, those huddled in their small craft watched in horror. Bent low, one figure desperately stretched a hand towards the inferno, overwhelmed by the searing heat that threatened to consume them. Amidst the horrifying expanse of flames, figures on a small vessel battled desperately, their bodies strained and urgent as they tried to smother the inferno. With grim resolve, they frantically threw canvas, tarps, and sails onto the burning deck, their gaze fixed on each flicker of fire threatening to consume them. With wide, terrified eyes, one figure declared the overwhelming heat too much to bear, desperately clutching a smaller one as they resolved to brave the water rather than burn alive. Behind them, another figure, head bowed and hand shielding their gaze from the inferno, seemed to sink into grim resignation. The figures strained, pushing the patrol boat, Amity, against the water, their bodies taut with effort to get it afloat. Suddenly, a voice cut through the struggle, conveying stark alarm as they reported the chopper had gone completely unresponsive, creating a terrifying new layer of uncertainty. With a desperate gaze and an outstretched arm, one figure urgently commanded the other to return to shore. But clinging to the boat's edge with a pained, determined expression, the second figure insisted on helping, admitting past disobedience, only to be met with a forceful, absolute refusal. Responding to the urgent command, one figure held the other's shoulder with a firm, protective grip, their face etched with grim determination. Yet the other's wide, resolute eyes remained fixed forward, unwavering despite the protective presence. Turning back with a resolute expression, their hand rose in a firm gesture as the boat sped away, a final plea escaping their lips. They insisted on the other's safety above all else, promising they would be all right. As long as the other remained behind, they would find strength to carry on. Riding along, their gaze sharpened as they spotted something adrift in the water. With a careful reach, they fished out what proved to be Doug's mangled inflatable, the sight chilling them with a dreadful implication. Their eyes snapped wide open in sudden alarm, a shout escaping their lips as they urgently pointed out something unexpected. With a desperate gaze, they implored for an explanation of what they were seeing. A shout about a whole mess of sharks escaped their lips as they froze, the chilling reality of approaching danger sinking in. With deliberate resolve, their hand gripped the cold metal of a gun, the safety clicking off as a single, monstrous presence zeroed in. In a panicked response, rounds were discharged towards the menacing fin that sliced through the choppy waves. Yet, each desperate shot merely turned the water, missing its mark and leaving the formidable threat unvanquished. The patrol boat Amity roared through the fog, a tense dance of evasion and pursuit as the massive shark lunged. With rounds still slapping the water, the individual aboard leaned out, their gaze fixed on the menacing fin as they fought back against the relentless threat. Just as a fleeting thought offered hope that the menace was gone and children safe, a disorienting calm settled over the water. Then, with a terrifying, wide-eyed gaze and jaws agape, a massive form erupted from beneath, striking with such force that the boat was violently lifted from the waves. The Amity cut through the water with urgent speed, now enveloped in a thick, disorienting fog that had suddenly brought an unsettling quiet. A voice echoed the relief that the menace was gone, yet quickly turned to deep concern, fearing how far they had been taken from the children's safety. A sudden, violent jolt sent them flying across the hull, their body flailing as a cry escaped their lips. With a desperate glance, they watched as their weapon arced through the air, helplessly lost to the churning sea below. After the violent jolt, they leaned over the boat's edge, eyes wide with furious indignation as a shark's fin sliced through the water. With a clenched fist, they roared a challenge at the creature, frustration evident in their every gesture. Amidst the aimless drift, a blinding rage had held them captive until their senses suddenly went stone still. A distant bleep pierced the desolate calm, drawing their gaze to a strange, emerging silhouette on the horizon, hinting at either salvation or further mystery. As one figure called out to catch the lifesaver and bind it to the pontoon, their focused rescue efforts were violently interrupted by a sudden wham from a menacing shark fin. With wide, startled eyes, another figure cried EEK and OOF while straining to make it tight, resolute in their effort to tow their island to safety despite the chaos. With a concentrated gaze fixed through the binoculars, their posture betrayed a mix of determination and frustration as they assessed the situation. The distant land appeared tantalizingly close, yet the realization that it remained agonizingly out of reach settled deeply within them. One figure, hat-clad, intently watched the fragile wreck they towed, calculating the precise swing needed to avoid running aground by getting too close. The other, slumped within the battered vessel, bore witness to the precarious rescue, a scene held together by little more than desperate hope and underlying fears. A sudden, violent SMRK sent debris flying as figures recoiled in alarm, realizing the shark had returned. The immense force caused their tow rope to strain and creak taut, threatening to snap under the relentless assault. Without a moment's debate, one figure plunged into the turbulent water with determined resolve. As splintering debris flew around them, another, eyes wide with horror, urgently shouted that the structure was breaking up, commanding everyone to swim for the cable junction. Plunging into the turbulent water, they thrashed their arms, deliberately creating a commotion. With a determined grimace, They urgently called out to the menacing creature, willing it to focus its attention on them instead. With a desperate cry of, "Oh!" the figure thrashed furiously, their gaze wide with a mix of exertion and grim determination. The dark fin slicing through the turbulent water was the chilling, deliberate answer to their commotion. The creature's explosive breach against the boat sent them hurtling violently through the air. Their body twisted mid-fall, eyes wide with stark terror as wood splintered around them, the impact deafening. Still reeling from the creature's explosive breach, one figure reached out with a desperate plea or final gesture, their gaze fixed on the turbulent water. The monstrous fin merely turned, slowly slicing away from the boat, a grim sign that a critical hand had been played, though the full consequences remained unseen. Clinging to the sole piece of wreckage, one figure huddled low, their eyes wide with fear as tumultuous waves threatened to engulf them. Behind, companions braced themselves, their gazes fixed on the unforgiving sea, determined to endure the chaos together. The waters erupted violently as a massive shark claimed another life, confirming the stark, terrible thought, another victim taken. A desperate, piercing shriek of Sean ripped through the turbulent scene, echoing the utter horror of what had just unfolded. With a terrifying WHROSH, the massive shark suddenly burst onto the deck, its weight threatening to capsize the vessel and sending figures scrambling. Eyes narrowed with fierce resolve, one figure plunged a gaff deep into the beast's eye, forcing it to abruptly lunge back into the churning sea in obvious pain. Amidst the chaos, a protective embrace held a smaller figure close as the other anxiously called out, asking if they were safe from the harrowing ordeal. Clinging to the smaller figure amidst the turbulent waters, one's gaze, filled with urgent worry, repeatedly called out, asking if they were truly all right. A tight, protective embrace conveyed profound relief, yet a palpable fear still lingered from the recent chaos. With the immediate crisis upon them, a hand reached out with urgent determination. It closed firmly around a dragging rake, the swift action a silent vow to confront the monstrous threat. With a fierce, focused gaze, the figure channeled every ounce of strength into a desperate, plunging strike. The makeshift weapon found its mark, piercing deeply into the monster's eye in a brutal act of survival. The line was pulled with urgent determination, rapidly unwinding from its spool. A frantic whir echoed as it vanished, pulled relentlessly after the desperate plunge. With a face taut with grim determination, the figure wrestled the winch control, struggling to throw it into reverse. Every muscle strained as they fought to counter the rapid unwinding and regain control of the desperate situation. The immense strain proved too much for the winch, sparks flying as tremendous friction overwhelmed the system. With a sudden, violent surge, the boat's electrical system completely shorted out, leaving behind a chilling silence and the dread of utter failure. A shocked exclamation escaped them as they suddenly realized, with a horrifying lurch, that they were now hooked onto the cable. The powerful, unseen force was already dragging the boat halfway into the churning water, swiftly pulling it towards the depths. A terrified gasp about the shark escaped the one in the small raft as they looked back to see a menacing fin cut through the water, followed by a powerful whoosh indicating its swift approach. From above, wide, worried eyes watched them, crying out a desperate Sean, even as the one in the raft urged, "Come on, Daddy, the raft." The terrifying reality of the approaching predator erupted around them, the sheer force of its impact violently tossing their body. Submerged and flailing amidst the furious splash, they were utterly at the mercy of the unseen power from below. Thrown by the predator's violent impact, one desperately clung to the raft, their anxious gaze fixed on the churning water, searching for any sign of escape. Below, the others struggled to pull themselves aboard, their grip a desperate lifeline as the sea erupted around them. Leaning desperately over the raft's edge, one gripped the frame tightly, their anxious gaze fixed on the menacing fin slicing through the water. A frantic thought urged them to get behind the cable, instinctively seeking any shield from the looming danger. With frantic eyes and a desperate cry about the cable, they lunged, gripping it overhead as water churned violently around their raft. Straining with all their might, they whispered urgent pleas for it to hold. The ocean exploded with a terrifying roar of water as a colossal shark burst forth, its immense maw opened wide. With brutal, unyielding force, it clamped down on one figure, while another was flung helplessly amidst the chaotic churn of foam and fury. With eyes wide, fixed on the terrifying sight, they gritted their teeth, every muscle straining with a desperate resolve. Their grip remained unyielding, a fierce, silent defiance against the monstrous surge. With unyielding resolve, their grip tightened desperately on the object, muscles straining against the colossal creature's power. The shark's bloodied maw, a horrifying chasm of razor-sharp teeth, surged terrifyingly close, its immense strength threatening to overwhelm them. A blinding flash erupted with a resounding ZZP as 60,000 very deserved volts slammed into the titanic figure. Its dark form convulsed violently, a guttural BR00 tearing through the air as the immense electrical current consumed it. As the monstrous tail thrashed and submerged, plumes of steam billowed from its seared flesh, filling the air with a welcome sizzling and the sweet, grim stench of victory. Gripping their paddle, one figure in the raft watched with an intense gaze, silently acknowledging the hard-won peace as the danger finally receded. The larger figure, steadily rowing, made a playful remark about finally getting to take the smaller one sailing. Gripping tight to their back, the smaller figure protested good-naturedly that they had been made to come, their gaze fixed on the receding shore.